Gee, it sure is boring around here. Oh. Zelda, you got any ideas of what we could be doing right now? Zelda, you alright there? You got a little something on your,
Nice job, hero.
Hey, I was sick!
You'll be sicker if we don't get that Triforce back. I personally guarantee it.
You know, I wasn't aware that The Legend of Zelda was the legend of her pompous attitude. Hey, Link, I think that something is up with the princess. She might be like a doppelganger or something. We gotta do something.
Zelda!
Link!
Oh boy, smooching time!
Ah!
Oof!
Well, I don't think he's gonna be much help. There's only one who could be responsible for this. Someone whose evil has gone unmatched. Ganon. Oh, no, he's fucked too. Who could have done something so horrible to the world of Hyrule? They must have been some kind of dicks. Or deeks. I don't know if I've mentioned this, but I'm like a massive fan of the Legend of Zelda series. It is my favorite video game franchise. While I'm not into every single entry in the franchise, the series has had a massive impact on my life. Majora's Mask is my favorite, with its dark and foreboding tone, and how it gives these beautiful details to even the smallest characters and moments. A Link to the Past is just fun to play, even to this day. The original still gets me with its sense of adventure and exploration, and Zelda 2 isn't allowed in my house. So, I've known for quite some time that there was a Legend of Zelda cartoon. Sort of. It was actually a weekly segment on the Super Mario Bros. Super Show. You know, the one with the Mario Bros. Rap.
With the Mario Brothers and plumbing's a game, we're not like the others who get all the fame.
What? If you know how corny the Super Mario Bros. Show is, you could probably predict that the Legend of Zelda cartoon was a similar tone and quality. I mean, there isn't a Zelda rap or anything. Actually, the intro to the Zelda cartoon is really cool. We start by seeing Ganon being all evil with his minions plucked straight from the game. And we see some of the cooler action sequences in the show. And Link and Zelda making a daring escape. It gets you really hyped up until you hear...
Hey! Excuse me, princess!
Excuse me for a moment.
Nope.
And when you start watching the actual show, you...
Excuse me, princess!
The Zelda cartoon is not good, like, at all. I mean, I knew it wasn't good straight from the start.
I'd ask you for a kiss, but it looks like you're all tied up.
But, like, I didn't know how bad it was actually going to be when I got into this mess.
Is that what they call a royal flush?
This show hurts me in such a way that I really don't even know what to say.
I'm very upset!
Okay, yeah, that'll do it. Buckle up. Put some soup in a bottle, because it's going to be a long review. Now, the Zelda series was always one of Nintendo's most prestigious series, playing Player 2 only to the Super Mario Bros. Series and later Pokemon. And even back in the day, it did take itself more seriously than most video game series. Mario Bros. Was always meant to be just a fun romp through a fantasy world. Meanwhile, the Legend of Zelda series was, well, a legend. The games always had these super detailed manuals. You know, when games actually made manuals, we had these artistic renditions of Link facing the monsters and trials within, Keys, Smoldorms, and the most dangerous foe of all, complying with FCC regulations. So, why do I bring this up?
Right, get out of here, I'm taking a bath!
I know! You look cute.
What?
What?
When people do talk about this series, they tend to bring up that the show came out in 1989, and it only had 2 games to work with. And as established, the second one doesn't count. So it's not going to be as deep and intricate as, like, Twilight Princess or Ocarina of Time. So I think I need to stab those arguments in their ugly, glowing eye. It wasn't really a joke to say that the second game doesn't count here. Both the show and the game came out in 1989 here in the United States. And while the show does have a couple of references to that game within the series, I'm going to assume that they really only had access to the first game and its instruction manual, which is why they keep calling rupees rubies, because that's what they were called in the first game's instruction manual, yellow rubies. Rubies can't be yellow! And a blue ruby is literally called a sapphire! Even with that benefit of the doubt, the show has a lot of other inaccuracies that would fill up any other bad adaptation.
This is the Triforce of Wisdom, Link.
No, it isn't. Like, I know I'm not the biggest Zelda expert in the world or anything, but I'm pretty sure that the Triforce is gold. Like, it's always been gold. It's been referred to as the power of gold. It's on the fucking title screen! Also, the Triforce talks in the series.
When one's in need of sage advice, one must seek out the one who's wise.
Not me, though. The Triforce of Wisdom, who is the literal embodiment of the value of wisdom. You must unwisely leave me behind and go seek out someone who is wise. I believe they, live in the mountains or something. Some of the inaccuracies are really minor, to the point you'd have to be, obsessed or something. In the show, Link is right-handed, except for this one random shot right here. Right hand, left hand, right hand. Left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, left, right. Some things in the Zelda series do change, and the games usually don't have much of a continuity between each other. One game is on the ocean, and one game is in the sky, and one game is in the pits of hell. But some things are consistent. For one, Link has always been left-handed, even in the original game. Yes, except the Wii port of Twilight Princess. Yes, I know, calm down, that one doesn't count at this point. The first game didn't have many characters to work with. It had Link, it had Zelda, and it had Ganon. However, in the instruction booklet, there was also an Impa, who would start getting in-game appearances later on. So here's a question. Why is she entirely absent from the show? The castle does have staff. There's this janitor guy, and then there's Sprite the Fairy.
What is this? Ugly People Day?
I don't like Sprite the Fairy. Oh yeah, by the way, this episode is great. Link is turned into a frog thing, and the only way that he can be saved is to kiss a princess. And he's more focused in getting transformed back into a human than he is in saving Zelda. And Sprite knows that the only way to get Link to be turned back into a human is with the princess's kiss. And she only reveals, at the end of the episode that she is a princess. When she could have done that for, half the episode. Also, Sprite has a crush on Link, which I don't even want to think about. And I get it. If you're not into the Zelda series, a lot of this stuff can seem petty. Even if you are into the Zelda series, a lot of this stuff is easy mistakes that you might not even notice. However, there is one mistake that can make a diehard Zelda fan cringe almost as much as saying Ocarina of Time is overrated. So, this is Aquamentus from the video game. He is a standard green dragon with a horn and he shoots fireballs. We even get to see the three-headed version Gleeok in the show. Here is Aquamentus in the cartoon. It's an underwater horse. A brown underwater horse with Pegasus wings. Why the fuck is the unicorn horn the only thing accurate about Aquamentus? I get it. I know that his name is Aquamentus, but how do you screw this up this badly? Goomba isn't a crab! It's a fucking spider! He's always been a spider! He doesn't have claws like what you're required to have as a crab! Oh, okay, I guess I'm wrong. He is a crab. Does Goomba look anything like a crab? Just so I know I'm not going apeshit for no reason, what does the manual say about Aquamentus? It's a type of dragon that some call a unicorn. Okay. It emits mean beams. Oh no! Not the mean beams! We're all gonna die! Link, get the fuck out of there! That thing has mean beams! Also, Tektites look like this, apparently. Sometimes the show forgets that it's supposed to be a fantasy world, and it gets to be, super fucking baffling, more than it probably should. At one point, we see a statue of Cupid, and I'm, sitting there, watching the show, wondering where the hell the Roman Empire fits into the Zelda timeline. Sometime after the Oracle games, I think. But the biggest what the fuck moment is when Link finds a ring in episode 7, and says that he always wanted one for Christmas. And I'm, sitting there, for, 5 minutes straight, just trying to process what he just said.
A force field ring. Just what I always wanted for Christmas.
Christmas, huh? So, Link, who's the Hylian Christ? It's Groose, isn't it? Now, the Zelda cartoon is meant to be a sequel to the original Zelda game. He found all 8 pieces of the Triforce of Wisdom and it's back together, which means we do kinda need a new story. So, what is the plot of this cartoon?
Whoever gets both Triforces will rule this land forever.
Got it, everyone? They've changed the plot about saving the world and searching for these mythical artifacts, to a game of capture the flag. I don't know why they didn't just try to adapt the video game in this video game adaptation. The original game had a pretty involved story. Just look at the intro. Many years ago, Prince Darkness Ganon stole one of the Triforce with power. Princess Zelda had one of the Triforce with wisdom. She divided it into 8 units to hide it from Ganon before she was captured. Now Link must find the 8 units to save her. It's one of the best video game stories of all time, downright Shakespearean. Up there with Ride to Hell Retribution or Two Worlds.
Warriors, hard ones.
Another beautiful day in the magical kingdom of Hyrule. Boring place. I used to roam the world, fighting monsters and sleeping in mud. A hero's life. Now look at me. Living in a castle, sleeping in a bed. Aren't I sweet?
So, I don't think I can hold this off any longer. Link in the show is fucking awful. We've all heard his infamous catchphrase.
Well, excuse me.
But that's where the problems start and not where they end. So if you showed me a picture of Quagmire, and then you showed me a picture of Link, I don't think I'd be able to tell the difference. Like, something is fundamentally wrong with Link in this show in a way that is aged super poorly. In the games, Link went on these epic quests due to his own heroism and, well, courage. In the show, Link helps out because he's fucking horny! Like, James Sunderland is looking at this guy sideways. Every single opportunity, he keeps asking Zelda for a kiss, like when they're tied up together, and when Zelda is in danger, and when Link is in danger, and when Link is a ghost. Like, there's a reason that one of the episodes is called The White Knight. Someone's about to get Twitter canceled. We're gonna see this hashtag any day now. I know it. And this here pisses me off, admittedly more than it should. I mean, first of all, let's talk about canon, not that it really matters. Link is an odd name for a hero, and once that you learn that you're not actually playing as Zelda, and Zelda's the name of the princess, the next question that comes up is, why Link? Well, the guy who made the game, Shigeru Miyamoto, has stated that Link is supposed to represent the link between the player and the game world. Like many silent video game protagonists, he's supposed to be a self-insert. You're not supposed to see yourself as playing a character trying to save Zelda. You're supposed to see yourself as trying to save Zelda.
Zelda!
Link!
Oh boy, smooching time!
Ah!
Oh!
It's not just unfunny, it's insulting. Like, this was corny and gross at the time, but as the time has gone by, Link's behavior here is just absolutely repulsive. Like, you guys know that I'm not, like, a member of the PC police or anything like that, but Link, especially early on in the series, just makes me uncomfortable. Like, what would Zelda's father, the fucking king of this country, say if he knew what Link was trying to do?
What are you up to, Link?
I was, just gonna swing in through your daughter's window and try to get her to kiss me.
Not a chance.
No?
No. You'll need to take flowers.
What the fuck is wrong with this cartoon? I'm glad your ass got turned into a fucking boat! And it was at that moment that I just realized that I may have members of my audience who have never played a Zelda game, and must be, like, very confused right now. Then again, we've all put princesses in glass bottles to save a monkey from being boiled in a poison swamp. I got a cow on my head. It's a memento from when I was walking through a park with a Pikachu mask, when I met a fox that asked me how many tiny cow statues were in town. And he gave me a piece of candy. At least I think it was a piece of candy. The nice old lady said it was. It does make me question the one that I found in the toilet, though. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, Link, right. Now, if you thought that Link was bad, you are absolutely right. However, oh dear God, Zelda. Now, Zelda has had an interesting history with the series. Sometimes she's just there, like in the original games or even more modern games like A Link Between Worlds. Sometimes she can be the best character in the game, and sometimes she can be the absolute worst. If you want me to, yes, I will elaborate in a future video. But good God, there has been no incarnation of Zelda worse than in this show.
What are you doing here?
Nothing much. Just heroically saving your life. Why?
You're supposed to be guarding the Triforce.
Link, what the fuck are you doing here? I told you to be in the tower. Never mind you just saved my fucking life. Get back to the fucking tower. Like, throughout the series, she is just the fucking worst.
You were standing on this flower, you brute!
You know, maybe that's why Zelda's a legend. Because no one is daring enough to get close to her pretentious ass.
This castle needs to be scrubbed from top to bottom, and you're going to help.
Okay, run this by me again. You're Zelda, the princess of an entire country. You are rich. You have a ton of resources and can basically tell anyone to do anything. You're an absolute monarch. And you're using Link, whose specialty is sword combat, and is the only person who can protect the world from Ganon, and protect the Triforce from falling into his hands. And you're using him to do spring cleaning. Can't you fucking hire a maid? Can't you hire 1,000 maids? Like, we find out later that she has hired one janitor for the entire castle. You know, Ganon, instead of trying to conquer Hyrule, maybe you could just, like, ask. Zelda has the goddamn hero on janitor's duty, and her father has the entire army building a water park. Oh yeah, there's an episode of the show where they're trying to get a water park built. This is based on a game with a magic watch that can stop time. But no, it is much more interesting to try and get a water park built. There is only one time that the show actually made me laugh, and that's the second to last episode. Ganon hits Link with the magic, and that turns him into a ghost. I mean, it's not the best episode because it has moments like this.
You swing that sword like a girl.
And you swing the sword like a bitch, hero. Zelda can see Link as a ghost, and they're constantly asking why. And then Ganon reveals it's because Zelda loves Link. Zelda loves Link.
Love you? Ha! It's just that without your body, you're even more useless than usual.
Zelda loves Link.
You idiot! I could have smothered in there while you were playing with those spiders!
Zelda loves Link.
You called for a hero princess?
Yes, but I guess you'll have to do.
And at the end of the show, Link's all like, I have clearly saved the wrong Zelda. You just go kiss a moblin. I don't care. I'm gonna try my luck with this other Zelda behind the fucking door here. Honestly, after watching this cartoon, Zelda 2 is a lot more understandable. Yes, Death Mountain is worth it to have to deal with any other Zelda than you! This cartoon came out at the absolute worst time for female characters. Like, up before the mid-80s, things weren't very good. Female characters were usually subservient to the male characters. They were sidekicks, if not undeveloped love interests. Like, the first character to really break out of that mold, I think, was Ellen Ripley from Alien, and most shows and movies took the wrong idea from that film. Being independent didn't mean your own person solving your own problems. It meant being an unsufferable asshole. And this went on for like 2 decades. Like, in terms of specifically female characters, Zelda here is one of the worst I've ever seen. She has nothing redeemable about her. They try to make her hyper-competent, but she keeps getting kidnapped and requiring a man to save her. They try to make her an independent woman who don't need no man, and she keeps asking Link to do everything for her. And in one episode, she falls head over heels in love with the first man who isn't Link that she sees. They try to hint that she's a love interest while building zero chemistry and turning her into an irritating harpy.
Zelda could only see Link if she was in love with him!
Yeah, maybe like a nagging mother, because that's what Zelda's written as to Link. Clean your room, Link. Wash your face, Link. Stop sleeping around, Link. We gotta do spring cleaning, Link. Because that was the best Zelda game ever. Magical Janitor of Hyrule. If you haven't heard of it, it was because it was only released on a satellite add-on for the Super Nintendo in Japan. It's very obscure. Oh, and this is something that I, literally just noticed. They got her hair color wrong. In the game, her hair is brown. In the show, her hair is blonde. What's the matter, Deke? Couldn't get that far? You gotta give the meat to the Goria to get through level 7. This how you beat the game! Like, if we're talking chemistry here, it's down to the most basic things. Link often calls Zelda Princess, and Zelda often calls Link Hero. Now on paper, that doesn't sound so bad, it could even be endearing. But for some reason, the voice actors can't say those words without them being filled with disgust. Link in the show says the word princess like he's the only survivor after the entire platoon was sent on a suicide mission. Zelda says hero like Link is one from the Fable universe, where they call people who murder full fucking towns heroes. Maybe I was wrong, maybe they do have chemistry. Link is sodium and Zelda is water. It's usually a sad thing when I have to say that the music is the best thing from the show. And the music is decent. The original game had 5 songs, but they managed to make it work. There are some nice original tracks, and they were able to remix the original NES music into something pretty cool. If I'm not mistaken, these were the first remixes of these songs ever. It must have been pretty cool to hear them back in the day. On the other hand, there's the sound effects. They are pulled directly from the game. This isn't much of a problem, except there weren't very many sound effects. So they use the Rupee Collection sound for everything, and it gets old really fast. Could you imagine hearing this sound just doing something normal? Constantly? Sometimes I feel like the show is held together by scotch tape.
Ganon's got the Triforce of Wisdom!
And he's getting away! We'll never catch him now!
Especially because we're just standing here, not moving. Technically, this is one of the sloppiest shows that I've ever seen. You know how in SpongeBob, when there's bubbles in the background, they move like bubbles, instead of being there stationary? It's little things like that that you really take for granted when you're watching a real cartoon. Episode 1 has lip-syncing problems, and they don't get better as time goes on. Actually, it feels like halfway through this they ran out of budget, because each episode is technically worse than the last. In episode 5, the king is supposed to be falling into a bottomless pit, but you can clearly see that there's bricks under the yellow sheet. In episode 7, Link gets kissed so hard by Dark Zelda that his lip-syncing breaks completely. Also in episode 7, there's this right here. So, Zelda is standing over a ledge. Link runs into her from behind. It's a straight hallway. And they both get knocked straight down, and somehow land to the side and start tumbling down the stairs. Guys, I know that perspective is difficult, but it is a fundamental for a reason, and that is definitely falling animation, technically speaking. Like, I took notes as I watched this, and at a certain point, it just became a growing list of animation and continuity errors. This is my favorite right here. They took a background and just crudely drawn mouths on it, where they don't even fit the faces. Hey Bob, I sent the colorist home early. What do we do about this shot? And just leave it. No one will notice. I noticed, you deeks! This show came out in the 80s, which is usually lumped into the dark age of animation. And a lot of the show's problems do come from that. There were more limited budgets and shows had rules. They had to be more formulaic. They had to rely on catchphrases. Excuse? That's not really an excuse for any of this. First of all, even back in the 1980s, like, this was not presentable. Like, these constant animation errors strike me as a show that wasn't even finished. That wouldn't be excusable at any point of time. But 89? DuckTales came out in 1987 and managed to change the industry with its standout characters, high production values, and quality writing. Ren and Stimpy came out in 1991, and Batman the Animated Series came out in 92. If none of that counts, let me introduce you to the Dungeons & Dragons cartoon. It ran from 1983 to 85, and it was another fantasy show based on a licensed property. And it was really, really good. Yeah, it had a lot of 80s cheese, and it wasn't always entirely accurate to the game, but it understood the spirit of the franchise. And even if you never considered playing D&D, the show had interesting and, like for the time, violent stories. I'm not complaining that Link can't use his sword like an actual sword. Neither could He-Man. But the He-Man cartoon doesn't make you feel stupid for playing with He-Man toys. Seriously, this Link couldn't find his way to level 2. Meanwhile, and I can't believe that I'm saying this with a straight face, but the My Little Pony cartoon was a more engaging fantasy experience than the Legend of Zelda cartoon. We had a fucking episode about spring cleaning and another episode about the king trying to make a water park. And I repeat, there were only 13 of these. While some of the episodes have interesting concepts, none of them really invoke the spirit of the Zelda games. You know, my favorite Zelda item was the big-ass magnet that you could use to pull entire castles underground. I think it got in the Temple of Bullshit from Minish Cap. The other plots aren't very unique among fantasy series. We have an episode with a mirror clone, there's a mind control episode, getting scammed by an unscrupulous merchant, turning into a fucking frog. That's fairy tale stuff. In episode 12, Ganon zaps Link into the evil jar. He has this whole army in front of Zelda and he wants to get the Triforce, which she has right there. So Ganon, wanting the Triforce more than anything else, with the hero completely out of the way, decides to peace out and tell Zelda to bring the Triforce to him. I mean, only having one game or two or whatever to work with isn't an excuse either. You know what else came out in 1989? The first Zelda manga. Only in Japan at the time, but it has been translated by fans since. It's filled with far more action and actual production values, although it is a little Dragon Ball in style. The last thing I don't like about this show is that it looks surprisingly influential. I mean, some things are okay, like Link's horse named Katrina here. That looks surprisingly like Epona, which he would get about a decade later. And this is the first time that Link used bees, which would actually become a mainstay item, for some reason. That's not exactly what I'm talking about. Whenever you've heard a comedian try to be funny about the Zelda series, crack any joke about it at all, what do you hear? Link is a horn dog. A stupid, arrogant horn dog. Like virtually every comedy bit I've ever heard about this series on the internet or beyond has that one punchline. Link is a stupid, arrogant horn dog. Link is the Link from the cartoon. And yeah, I get you could have any interpretation of the character that you want, and it would be just as valid. But where every interpretation is possible, why are you flat out stealing the one that was awkward and uncomfortable from the start and has only gotten worse since? Even within the series, Link has been the straightforward hero in the original games, much more serious in Ocarina and Twilight, a bit clumsy in Wind Waker, and so on. There's tons of different things that you could do with him. Me personally, I make him say that Link Between Worlds is the most overrated video game of all time and is a pale imitation of its predecessor. So he gets beat up and not me. Speaking of the 80s, there's something else out there that needs my attention. We'll be doing it soon. First, a break though. I'm so hungry I could eat an Octorok. The Legend of Zelda is my favorite video game franchise of all time, but I have a bit of a confession to make. I've actually kind of fallen out with the series for a while. I played all of the main series console games up to Twilight Princess, but my family never got a Wii. They went Xbox 360 that generation, and so I missed Skyward Sword. Definitely didn't get a Wii U, so I was never able to get to the remake of Wind Waker, but I did get the Switch, and I actually have all 3 Switch Zelda games. I have 3 of the 4 Zelda games for the Switch. But I've been busy with life and other projects, so I've never really gotten an opportunity to catch up with what I've missed. That is, until now. You see, I had a thought. It's usually incredibly dangerous when this happens, but I decided to give it a go. You see, I usually review cartoons on this channel. One of my more recent reviews was of the actual Zelda cartoon.
Hey! Excuse me, princess!
And then I thought, what if review was video games? I mean, it's not totally without pretense. I have reviewed video games on this channel before, like once. Then again, some people have shown interest when I have floated this idea. So, what do I got to lose? This is my retrospective of the Legend of Zelda series. I'm going back to the very beginning of the series and take a look at each and every game with a more critical eye. All of them. Now, there are times when I'm going to be harsher, even towards some of the more loved games in the series. It may even come across as nitpicking sometimes. So, I want to say this from the outset. I can only do this because I love these games. I love most of these games. I would not be able to go in as deep as I can in many of these games if I didn't beat them time and again. Most of the Zelda games that I have played and beaten many times. On the other side of the token, I'll try to be as fair to the games I have yet to play. Many of them, Skyward Sword, the Oracle games, and Phantom Hourglass, I've yet to play because I have not heard great things about them. Then again, I've heard bad things about every single Zelda game after Ocarina and before Breath of the Wild when they came out. But we're getting ahead of ourselves, aren't we? Let's start where it all began. Now that's a sound that just hits me right in the nostalgia. Once again, to be upfront, this is a game that I did grow up with. Why do I bring this up? Because I've heard this a lot, that this game has aged rather poorly. Most notably with a review by Some Call Me Johnny. And considering that that review was 8 years ago, yes, really, the game itself hasn't gotten any younger. I mean, it was an early NES game. Not quite a launch title, but not far behind. In the NES era, most developers were still trying to figure out how to make a proper full-fledged video game. And not a repeating one-screen affair where the only point was to get points. Like, if you go back to the original Super Mario Bros., a lot of those levels are repeats. You can come across many levels that just have the same layout as a previous level with just a few more obstacles. Many developers didn't know what was fair, what was cruel, and almost every genre was archaic at the time, and NES games had many technical limitations. The beefiest games could only barely reach 1 megabyte of storage space, and developers wanted these very small games to last as long as possible. People could generally only afford 1 new game per month, so they used a lot of cheap tricks that are taboo today, making the game absurdly difficult, confusing, or cryptic. And the bad translations didn't help either. Despite all of this though, the original Legend of Zelda has gone down as a classic. To this day, it continually gets re-released, and it seems to be beloved in the gaming community. So I guess the question I'm asking here is, does it hold up? Let's pretend that no other Zelda game exists, and see if this is still a worthwhile play in 2021. The game's 35th anniversary. Oh, Song of Time, where did you go? Alright, The Legend of Zelda. So the story is... yes. It's more or less a basic fairy tale plot that most games were using at the time. Sprite is you, princesses win. There's a bit more to it than usual, at least for a non-RPG game. The Prince of Darkness, Ganon, the weird pig demon, is trying to conquer the land of Hyrule. So the princess of this land, Zelda, broke the Triforce into 8 units and hides them in dungeons full of Ganon's minions. Yeah, good going, Zelda. Then she gets captured. And now there's only one person who can save the world. He's canonically known as Link, but since I don't want to get criticized for being cliche again, I'm just gonna call him Pineapple. And oh dear Groose. So, the overall story of this game is that you're trying to stop Ganon from taking over the world. But, it looks like he already kinda did. So let's see here. Besides all of the monsters running around, things don't look too happy. There aren't many people in the world of Hyrule, and those that are here are buried in caves. And like 90% of them are old. So whatever's been going on has probably been going on for a while. Got dead trees everywhere, and the biggest area on the map is the graveyard. There's not even a speck of grass anywhere. I don't know if this is an unpopular opinion, but I never really liked how this game looked. I know it was an early NES game, but is some grass really too much to ask for? Dragon Quest gave me grass. When I tell this to people, they usually say it's because Pineapple is also green, or at least dressed in green. He'd blend into the ground around him. Those people have never found the magic ring that turns Pineapple's outfit gray, that does blend in with this beige desert color. And despite being gray, I never lost track of him after getting the magic ring. I know this is not the biggest complaint in the world. All I'm saying is that maybe more people would know that the desert is supposed to be a desert if the whole world didn't look like a desert. The enemy graphics aren't too much better, moblins don't look too different from Gorias, levers look like sorry game pieces, and the rocks that fall from Death Mountain look like donut holes. As for music, the songs in this game are really great. They're classics. The starting song gets you entranced with its sense of mystery. Before taking you in on an adventure of its own, when the items you'll be coming across start scrolling down the screen. The dungeon music is spooky and foreboding, creating a sense of atmosphere as you fight your way through these trials and enemies. And the overworld theme, it's so catchy you could listen to it for hours. You, will be listening to this for hours, because for 95% of the game, the overworld theme and the dungeon theme are the only musical tracks. The final level does have its own unique track, but other than that, you'll be hearing this, and keep in mind, this game was designed to take days or weeks to beat it if you don't know where everything is, and didn't have the internet which didn't exist yet to look things up. The overworld theme is fantastic, and I love it, just, you know, I need something to break up the monotony. That would be very nice. You know, other than this. Which you'll also probably be hearing quite a lot, because this game is not easy. Zelda 2 usually gets a lot of flack for being the most difficult game in the series, but the original is no slouch in that department, and that comes mostly down to the controls. The NES is actually capable of 8-directional movement. You'd never know that if you played most NES games. In The Legend of Zelda, you can only move in 4 directions. If you're not used to it, or you are used to one of the more modern Zelda games, it can come across as really stiff. Even I needed a brief period to get adjusted to it, but it really isn't much of an issue, at least at first. Level 1's enemies are fairly simple and can be taken out without too much effort, but the enemies and the enemy placement quickly go from cruel to evil. It starts off with one occasional room. The room where you get the boomerang in level 2, for instance, you gotta take out these boomerang brothers while statues keep wailing at you. Without the magic ring, this room is very difficult. By level 8, you're dodging statue fire while trying to hit a boss that only briefly opens its eye that never gives you a moment to breathe. You know what the difference between this and Gradius is? In Gradius, you're not controlling a forklift. Often the game does require you to maneuver when it's really not possible. With that being said, there are maybe a dozen enemy types in the game, and on their own, only 2 are really a problem. Keese, Stalfos, and the like go down pretty easily. Just a couple of sword swipes, or even a boomerang attack in some cases, and you're good. Then you have Dark Nuts, introduced in level 3. These things conjured up nothing but terror in 7-year-old me. And as an adult, I still feel uncomfortable entering a room with these things. So here's how they work. You can only hit them from the sides or the back. And here's how Pineapple works. His sword is only barely enough to hit them from a safe distance. Because more often than not, when you attack a Dark Nut, they'll turn in your direction. And if they turn in your direction, they move in your direction. I've been playing this game for more than 20 years. And if there is any kind of pattern to how or when the Dark Nuts turn, I've never found it. But the biggest issue with them is that the game likes to throw so many of them at once. And it's almost always mandatory that you have to kill them all. And when there's a lot of Dark Nuts, or worse, blocks taking up space in a room with a lot of Dark Nuts, or even worse, statues shooting at you while you need to fight Dark Nuts, it can be like doing precision surgery to get through a room with any health left. Most of my deaths were in level 8 because of this room right here with the dark nuts and statues. I could get through it, but by that time I was really low on health, and the game is nice enough to make sure there's another room up ahead full of dark nuts that you've also got to kill. And if you die, all common enemies in a dungeon respawn. The other big problem enemy is the Wizrobes. They don't do as much damage as the Dark Nuts, but it's harder to take them out without getting hit yourself, because they like to teleport all around the place. And if they see you, they start machine gunning mean beams at your face. With those two enemies, it makes it sound like the game only has sporadic difficulty spikes. But, no. You see, the developers know how the enemies work together, to your detriment. So let me introduce you to the bubble. This disco skull doesn't do any damage to you directly, but when it hits you, you can't use your sword. You have to rely on your sub-weapons. On its own, this is no big deal. However, when they put a like in the room, now we got a problem. Or you do, if you bought a big shield, because the like eats the big shield, and you can't hurt it because you can't use your sword anymore. Pro tip, never buy the big shield. You won't need it, and you couldn't keep it anyway. But one of the most aggravating rooms in the entire game is the one that combines bubbles with wall masters towards the end of level 7. Wall masters, like bubbles, don't hurt you. What they do is take you back to the beginning of the level, so it's more or less an insta-kill. I mean, you still have your health, whoop-de-doo. When you choose to continue after dying in a dungeon, you start with only 3 hearts. And considering how difficult some of these levels can be, you're probably better off pretending that this game boots you back to the start like Zelda 2. Because you ain't going to be beaten many dungeons with only 3 hearts. Unless you like hearing this. Wow, that is the most annoying sound that I've ever heard. Well, I wouldn't worry about it so much. I'm sure that Nintendo, as a professional game developing company, has some common sense and would make sure that such an annoying sound won't be in any future Zelda games after this one. Seriously, this sound makes me want to go commit die. Lots of games do this, I understand, but it is always a problem and no game should ever do this. Seriously, could you make the sound effect any more annoying?
Hey! Excuse me, princess! Hey! Excuse me! Excuse me! Excuse me! Excuse me! Excuse me! Excuse me!
Well, I guess that answers that question. No, you cannot make the beeping heart sound more annoying than they already are. Luckily, if you don't want to hear the heart beeps, you can drink a magic potion to refill your health immediately. Oh yes, this sound is so much better. So, I've been really negative up to this point. It sounds like I really don't like this game. And that couldn't be further from the truth. I really do like this game. I'm just not blind to its flaws, many of which are just because of its age. I mean, yeah, it is difficult, but it's not unfair like a lot of NES games. Well, it is kind of unfair and it kind of isn't. The mechanics are always consistent. You know immediately what does what can hurt you, what can help you, and so on. Things that are incredibly important to beating this game, such as the medicine shop, a fairy fountain, and the candle, are all pretty close to the start, and every single one of the dungeons aren't too difficult to find. You don't have much versatility, but you don't really need that much of it. While I often felt outgunned, I never felt like the game was explicitly going out of its way to get me killed. This is how you do difficulty in a game correctly. And yeah, I do wish that you restarted with full health, but I really wouldn't change anything else about the overall difficulty. Ironically enough, most of the bosses are really easy, at least the mandatory ones. You can beat Aquamentus and Donga without getting hit. You can kill Manhandla with 1 bomb. Well, maybe you can, I obviously can't, but it is possible. And Goma goes down in 1 hit. The only boss in this game that's given me any trouble is the multi-headed Gleeox. Even Ganon isn't much of a problem. It's not a very good fight with Ganon. You need to stab around randomly because he is invisible and hope that you randomly hit him a few times. But it's not difficult. One thing this game often gets criticized for is being cryptic, which is not something I agree with. Yes, the translation of this game is very bad. To this day, I do not know what Eastmost Peninsula has the secret means. Hyrule doesn't have any peninsulas in this game. What people often bring up is that this game doesn't give you much direction. Nothing is spelled out for you. And quite honestly, that's what I love about this game. Nothing is spelled out for you. The game doesn't give you much direction. A lot of more modern games, even within the Zelda franchise, really do spell things out for you. A little too much. And by a little too much, I mean a lot. to the point where it can make you feel kind of like an idiot, and not in a good way. The Zelda series is known for puzzle solving, and it should require you to use your head. And placing a crack on the wall wherever a bomb is needed, that's not a puzzle. That's not a hidden secret. That might as just well be open. You may as well replace bombs with keys. The original Legend of Zelda doesn't have any cracks on the walls at all. Now, when there are no cracks on the walls, how do you know where you can bomb or use the candle for that matter? Well, in the dungeons it's pretty obvious. There are only 4 directions in which a bomb can be used, and if you got a map, you generally have a good idea at where the boundaries of the dungeon are. But outside, when everything looks the same and there's no obvious telltale signs, how do you find anything? Well, here's an example. Here is the area right above the area you begin. The back of this area has a couple of indents. Now the first thing that comes to mind is to place a bomb in the smaller indent. That looks intuitive. Nothing there though. What about the other side? Boom, secret. It's really not that cryptic. Like, most of the actual secrets in this game are pretty intuitive. This one lone rock by the ocean. Come on, where else would anyone put a secret? There's a corner tile on the map that you can't reach? Well, there has to be something there. What if I tried to push against this wall? I mean, the shop for the meat is hidden in the bush that's on the corner. Am I just crazy or too used to this game? I'm not saying that these are obvious, but I do think that an average person could figure these things out without the help of the internet or even the aid of a friend on the playground. I know this because most of these things I figured out myself as a young child. I can't guarantee that this will work for every secret in the game, but it did help me get all of the heart pieces and enough caches of rupees to let me buy everything I needed and find all 9 dungeons. The Goriah in level 7 gets a lot of flack. You probably know the solution by now because of how cryptic people claim it to be. You've got to give him the meat, or the enemy bait, but the only hint you've got is grumble grumble. That alone is quite a bit esoteric, definitely, but it's not like you've got a lot of options. If you attack him, the fires start attacking you. So what's the only item that you have that's not an attack? Oh, the meat. On top of that, Goriahs are one of the few enemies that are attracted to the bait. And sure, nothing tells you to go out and buy the bait, but if you see an item in a game like this and you don't want to buy it, I don't know what to tell you. The map itself gets a lot of hate too. You know, this big gray box. The overworld map is definitely not helpful, but you can do what I did, and I drew my own map. I mean, it's not the best map in the world, obviously, because I started in the middle, but it kind of feels pretty good that I have physical proof that I made it through this game. This is probably the old school gamer in me talking, but there is something satisfying about drawing maps, taking notes, like you had to do in those old games. Although I probably should have used a bigger piece of paper. Hyrule in this game is quite large, especially for an NES game. While it wasn't the first open world game, Ultima 1 is arguably the first true open world game, The Legend of Zelda gave us a world full of possibility, full of mystery. It was the first game that I can remember, at least on a console, that let you do what you wanted to do. Go wherever you want to go. Hey kid, don't want to go to level 1? That's fine. You can start off with level 3, 2, 8, 5, or 6. You know, if you want to. You might not be able to get through Dungeon 5 yet, but maybe you could see what you're going to be up against in the future. I've heard this term once before, and like, never again, so I don't know who came up with this term, or if it's really even a term that other people use, but I've heard this called the start to slime ratio. The question it poses is this: how long does it take for the player to get from pressing the start button to actually doing what they got the game for? For example, in Dragon Quest, how long does it take from starting the game to fighting your first slime? And having very, very bad start to slime ratios is something that really gets to me in most modern games. Even in modern Zelda games. Wind Waker is probably the worst example of this in the entire series. Why do people want to play that game? Usually, it's because you want to sail on the Great Sea, and find adventures on new islands, explore the ocean. Great! It takes about 2 hours to get the boat, and 5 hours for the game to finally let you go where you want to go. And even then, the game tells you to head straight to the next target with no delay. Like I said though, that is probably the worst example in the Zelda series, but even A Link Between Worlds, which was praised for abandoning a lot of the baggage the series had been pulling along since Ocarina, still made you get through the entire first dungeon before you could really go about your own business. The most ridiculous start to slime ratio I can think of is Animal Crossing New Horizons, which has one of about 2 weeks. Real time. Once you start noticing this and keeping track of it, It'll probably irritate you to no end like it irritates me. You see, the original Legend of Zelda has a start to slime ratio of 0 seconds. You press that start button, and you're off doing exactly what you want to do, going wherever you want to go. You don't even need to get the sword. No long unskippable cutscenes, training dungeon, mandatory hide-and-seek game, learning how to use the slingshot that you never use again. It's just play the game. Who would have thought that when I pressed the play button, I wanted to play the game? I personally believe that this is not too much to ask for, even in a modern game. Stardew Valley, for instance. Create your character, you can skip the cutscene that you've seen a million times, and you're off, doing exactly what you want to do in the game. Sure, not everything is open to you right away, but even on replay, you're able to do pretty much whatever you'd want to do. And I understand a lot of this is for first-time players, and playing through a game the first time, this isn't going to affect you much, but here's the way I see it. A video game that you only play once is a bad video game. Video games that are designed well should expect players to play them again. And one way that absolutely kills replayability is having a bad start to slime ratio. This is the #1 thing that keeps me away from most modern games, especially AAA ones, no matter the developer. I don't want to play an RPG and wait 3 hours before I get to the very first battle Persona 4. In an open world game like Zelda, I really don't want to have to wait hours to experience that open world. I know that this sounds incredibly impatient, and perhaps I am an impatient person, but there is something that you really have to keep in mind. Time is a commodity. In this day and age, a lot of people don't have a lot of spare time to spend on video games because they're always working. And even the people that do have a lot of spare time, they have a ton of other options that start immediately. I'm always going to see it as a problem that I can beat the original Zelda, A Link to the Past, and Link's Awakening back to back before Wind Waker even opens up. And I'm bringing this up specifically now because this is a problem that most modern Zelda games have. It is something that we'll be coming back to. I'm not saying that I want all Zelda games to start instantly. I mean, being able to skip the starting cutscene that I've seen a million times would be a nice start, but what I'm saying is that you've got to put the focus on where it should be. And while the Zelda games do get more story focused as time goes on, and they can have some really good stories, the series is primarily a gameplay focused one. When most people think of Zelda, they think of delving dungeons, solving puzzles, getting cool new items, and not so much the game's creation myth. The original Legend of Zelda is an example of something very specific. Graphics age poorly. Even innovation ages poorly. This game was the first cartridge-based video game to allow battery backup saves. You know how you save your game without dying? You press up and A on the second controller. One thing that never gets old, that never really ages, is the raw gameplay experience. Even if it's been iterated on 1,000 times, when you get down to it, The Legend of Zelda is really fun to play. Back a few years ago, I set out to really beat this game for the first time. I got deep into the weeds with the secrets, and yes, I played the game without a guide, because when it comes to playing a game blind, there are two options. You do it once or you do it never. And back then, I was immersed in the world. Even if it looked dead, there was mystery, things to find. Sure, sometimes I lost money due to door repairs, but it made finding that heart piece all the sweeter. However, as you might point out, nowadays I know all the secrets. I can find all of the heart pieces in each cache of rupees, guide or not, because it's all conscripted to memory. I know the exact layout of the world. However, that sense of mystery hasn't really gone away, because of how well the game is designed. When I originally played and beat it, it took me a good few days, and I must have died dozens of times doing it. In this current playthrough that I've done for this review, I died about 8 times, and I beat it in just over 2 hours. When you beat a game in just over 2 hours, it becomes super tempting to try and beat it again. See if you can get that time under 2 hours. Who knows? Maybe one of these days I can beat the game without dying. Now it's all about seeing how well I can do, how well I can optimize things, where the limits of my own abilities are here. Because the dungeons in this game can be completed in a wide variety of orders, it begs you to experiment. Even without the second quest or a swordless run, there are many different ways to play the game. Masters of the game can beat it 100% in just over half an hour, although they do use glitches, and yes, this game has a lot of them. Most famously is this screen teleportation glitch. Like that one, a lot of the glitches in this game are really beneficial, but some of them not so much. Here's something that no one else points out, but the flute item is completely broken. Well, sort of. The flute has two uses. Number one, it warps you to each dungeon entrance in sequence, so 1, then 2, then 3. It's also used to open Dungeon 7, and when these two uses intersect, that's when the game has an issue. Because the flute opens Dungeon 7, it cannot be used to teleport from Dungeon 7 to beyond. So you have to leave the area, and when you do that, the flute teleports you back to level 7. So you're stuck teleporting back to level 7, and maybe the level you completed before it, because you can't go beyond that because it keeps leaving you trapped at level 7. The last time I played this game, a couple of years ago, I did it for a series. I had this book, 1001 Video Games You Must Play Before You Die, and I was going through each of the games of the book to really see if it was a must-play. Since the book had a lot of weird entries like Uno. Yes, Uno, the card game, is a video game that you must play before you die according to the book. And when I got to this game, the original Legend of Zelda, I actually originally said no. That this was not a game that you had to play to really have a complete video game experience. It was a close call though, because the game is very innovative. My biggest issue at the time was actually with the grinding. You see, you need a lot of rupees to get through the game. The meat costs 60 rupees, the candle costs another 60, the arrow costs 80 rupees, and the magic ring, that's gonna cost you 250, 5 below the maximum amount of rupees. Keep in mind, every time you fire an arrow, that costs you another rupee. Every time you want a magic potion, because, you know, you just have to hear this beautiful sound, that's 68. And potion costs can stack up fast if you're not very good at the game. But if you're not so reliant on the potions, and you stay away from the big shield and the extra keys, the hidden rupees on the map are enough to buy every mandatory item in the game, especially if you know how to get bombs without buying them. So I definitely think I want to rescind my old verdict. At no point do you ever have to farm for rupees, even if you want the big expensive cool stuff. The game is actually paced pretty nicely. Although, the dungeons don't go in sequential order of difficulty. Like, Dungeon 3 is harder than Dungeons 4 and 5, and the only dungeons that are easier than 7 are Dungeons 1 and 2. So, a new verdict. This game has a few wrinkles here and there, because it's very old. It also has some beliefs that probably should have been left in the last century. But not only was it a pioneer, it's still influencing games in this day and age, even beyond the Zelda franchise itself. While very few games have its explicit sense of total freedom, there are quite a lot of open world games in this day and age. I can definitely say that this is not a game for everyone, but I do think that if you want to have a complete video game experience, you know, just see what the whole medium has to offer, this is definitely one that you should give a chance. Because I do believe that modern games could still learn a lot from it.